Good morning, everybody. Resilience. What does physical resilience mean?
You're fit.
Okay, it means you're fit. So why do we say fit instead of resilience? Do we mean something more?
Ability to bounce back.
Capacity to bounce back.
Withstand.
Withstand.
Strength.
Strength. Okay, so we're getting a fairly good sense of... I'll just move across so that you can get through.
It's not Jante, it's Monday morning.
That's all right. So it's Jante when she comes.
Thank you. She loves it.
It's also a learning.
Yes. In other words, what we're saying is, and the intimation is, you have to be of a certain level and also something in terms of down and back up. Right?
Yeah.
Resilience suggests that there is something that's affected you. You've actually maybe come down a notch, but had the spring mechanism within to be able to, someone might have used this expression, bounce back. Okay? Resilience. What might emotional resilience therefore be?
Going through something negative and being able to come back.
True, but say it in emotional terms, yeah?
Go through a negative situation.
Going through
then being
negative
able to deal
situations
with it.
and being able to
Deal with it.
Get back to normal.
get back to where you were. So does that suggest that challenge of emotions, which means emotions get haggard in some shape or form, whether they become anger, whether it becomes depression, whether it becomes whatever, but you have the capacity to spring back, okay? And we have to find out what the back is.
To heal, to be able to heal.
To heal, fine. And what might some spiritual notion of resilience be?
Internally strong, internal strength.
Internal strength, but what might the dynamic be of spiritual resilience? Give me a case example of what spiritual resilience might be.
Being disappointed and then going back into belief.
Good, very good. So in other words, it's something that affects something which is much more profound within you, which you may not be able to identify, because what's the nature of disappointment? What's disappointment? I'll use your example. What's disappointment? Analyze it.
Expectations that cannot be met.
Expectations that are not met. That are not met. So in passing, what's a good solution for never being disappointed?
Being satisfied.
Never have expectations. Remember, that's Laibl Wolf's motto. Never have any expectations. Expectations come from the ego. I expect you to. If I have no expectations of you, I can't be disappointed. However, that's not necessarily the wisest of approaches. Do we not have anything in terms of being able to recognize right from wrong, good from bad? Should we not have any areas of personal judgment? And if that's not expectation, what is it? In the place of expectations, we have
Disappointment.
goals.
I was going to ask you about that.
The difference between expectations and goals: expectations are here, I expect, ego. Goals are out there. I'll shoot for the goal. You let me down. I don't expect you to succeed, but I will strategize to create a better goal in terms of your development, your growth, your capacities, etc. Big difference between expectations and goals, although usually it's very seen as very subtle. It's a world of difference. Expectations is ego-centered, goals are other-centered.
Does that mean you should not expect, or should you?
No, I'm saying it's good not to expect, but it's good to have goals. In other words, you see something, you recognize that there's a shortcoming, or it's wrong, or it's bad, and it may be of someone that you have a relationship with, so you are disappointed by it. That's because you expect. Rather than that, accept it as a status quo. Now, what can I strategize to improve the situation? That's goal. As opposed to I expect. You still use judgment. The difference between judgment and being judgmental, a lot of people just interpose it, but they're different.
Yeah, judgmental is having, I suppose, an expectation of what someone else should have done.
Judgmental comes from me. My standards. You don't meet my standards. Judgment is referring to some objective set of rules, objective set of standards, whatever that might be, etc. Of course, people who don't have an objective set of rules, a belief system, whatever that might be in your personal lives, will have great difficulty and will always therefore be judgmental because it comes from them. Okay, so
judgment?
Judgment is to have an objective set of rules, whether that be the Torah, whether that be the democratic processes in Parliament, whatever's going to be the objective stand that you accept as your belief system, then you're forming a judgment. You're misbehaving, not because of my particular set of standards, but because of objective set of standards, etc. If it's my set of standards, then I may be being judgmental. Okay? Which everyone says is always wrong.
How can this be overcome as a human nature?
Masterfulness, grow, become bigger, enlarged as a person. Somewhere along the line that's called wisdom. Okay? Become wiser. Okay. So, under what circumstances is resilience needed? When do we need to exercise resilience? So I've given you a number of case scenarios. When a family member is troubled, many people respond to our loved ones being troubled in a curious set of ways. Either people turn a blind eye to it. I'm talking about people who are close. I'm not talking about strangers. Why might someone turn a blind eye to someone close to them being troubled?
They don't want to face the facts.
Why? Good. Why?
They don't know what to do.
Too painful.
Exactly. It's too painful.
Or they try to help, but the help is not taken, so they just...
Okay, that's something else, but I wanted to state just for a moment as to why they might not at all offer any assistance. Maybe because of past experience that they are not going to take the advice, so what's the point? But very often it's because of pain, right? It's too painful, so I turn a blind eye to them. What's another response that people have to troubled circumstances?
Avoidance.
Almost the same kind of thing, avoidance, blind eye. Others, angry. You become angry with the very person whom you love when they're troubled. Why might you become angry?
Sorry, I'm going through this at the moment.
Good. First-hand experience. Go through it.
For me, I just almost see a different person. Like it's not what you used to. Everything's changed.
And therefore, why you get angry?
It's a person that you love so much.
Yes.
And, for example, used to be very switched on.
I agree he's changed, she's changed, but why get angry?
Maybe it's making my reality different now.
Very good.
It's changing
Upsets
everything.
the atmosphere.
Me. It's not good, it's understandable. It's not good, because that's back to ego. I get angry because I want you to be different, whether legitimately or not. Okay, but it's again to do with me. Anger is always to do with me. So anger might be a response because I am affected. It's not what I want. So that might be another response. What are other responses to people being troubled?
Get away from it.
Distancing, that might be like our first one, whether it's avoidance or whether it's turning a blind eye or running away, which is what you're suggesting.
It can also be positive, because you can also believe that that person can actually deal with it and let them do it.
Strategic response, okay, but that's already formulating a strategy, that's goal orientation, and saying this is the approach I will take because I believe in the long run this is what's best for the person. But here we're talking about resilience. So resilience is what goes on within us in our response to troubled circumstances. So resilience means being able to come back to becoming a strategic person and not becoming emotionally taken away with the situation and expressing anger, expressing avoidance, expressing escapism, whatever might be the case, but coming back to the goal orientation. That's resilience. That you have the capacity to come back to your true self, to your higher order self, the part of you that really makes the world a better place and makes the people around you better individuals. That's part of resilience. Okay, when we see the world negatively as a result of personal fatigue. Now, I know no one here gets tired at the end of a day or at the end of a week or at the end of a project, what have you, but there's a certain phenomenon that takes place when we're tired, and that phenomenon is we aren't as much in control of ourselves as we would be if we are not tired. Fatigue takes a toll. So if a person is fatigued, if an athlete is fatigued, he or she will not be able to perform optimally, understandably. But there is such a thing, as you all well know, as emotional fatigue. Okay? Now, what might be some of the products of emotional fatigue?
Not making the correct judgment.
Poor judgment call. It means your mind is not operating as well as it could, not as clear as it could.
And you're not as resilient.
You're not good. Quid pro quo, all right? Your emotions tend to be more ragged, which is another way of saying that you emote more easily and unwisely. In other words, the emotions flow along the path of least resistance, least control, least masterfulness, least mastery. And therefore they tend to be wrong because emotions have no wisdom. And because your mind is fatigued at the same time as your emotions tend to be fatigued, under those circumstances, Moach doesn't shalit al halev, the mind doesn't dictate the direction of the emotions, and the emotions flow along the least resistance, and that is usually unwise. Resilience, therefore, means having the capacity to be able, in a state of fatigue, to nevertheless be your best self, or much better self than the fatigue situation would otherwise dictate. There's no such thing as I'm tired and that's why I did it, or that's why I said it. Resilience means you can overcome it. Another case situation, and someone hinted at this, when someone is behaving in a self-destructive manner around you, someone close to you, in a self-destructive manner, your child, your spouse, your parent. I don't know how many of you still have parents, but that's usually a very, very good situation to discuss. But if you don't have a parent, then think in terms of a child, even if it be an adult child. And you recognize that either the parent is now getting a little bit old and therefore unable to think as clearly as otherwise, or the child is still immature even though he or she's 35 years of age for whatever reason, and they're acting self-destructively. What are your feelings? Usually anger, that we good, despair,
Failure.
Frustration.
yeah, aspects of hopelessness and helplessness. Aspects. You can't control a 35-year-old child, nor can you control any child whatsoever. Learn that quickly. Nor can you control an adult who is waning and therefore not seeing the world as clearly as possible. So there's a hopelessness and a helplessness that can set in. Therefore, what does resilience mean in those circumstances? Having the inner strength to put yourself into their situation and once again strategize. You may not get optimal results. It may take 5 years perhaps to get an optimal result, but you have to strategize in the moment. And in each of those moments, you have to be able to be resilient. Resilience, once again, means mind takes over, drives the emotions wisely in the correct direction. There's a mantra that's evolving here. And that mantra is mind giving a pathway, a trajectory, a compass bearing to emotions. That's in almost all circumstances. But resilience is more than that. Resilience means the strength of willpower to draw on that. Resilience is more than just wisdom per se. Wisdom is passive. It's important, but it's passive. To be able to live wisdom in the moment requires willpower, ratzon, willpower. Without that drive of ratzon, resilience doesn't come to the fore. And when you practice it over and over again, you become a resilient individual. It's the repetition and the practice. So it's more than just wisdom, it's more than just mind, it's more than just emotions. It's also the natural driving power, bringing it to the fore at the right moment. It's not an afterthought. It's not when you go downstairs, I wish I should have said that and I should have done that, etc. It's in the moment.
Just being able to think on your feet.
Yeah, common expression, think on your feet. But that think on your feet is, yeah, okay, that's good. I was going to say that's part of wisdom, but to be able to exercise that is to be able to be resilient. When we suffer a setback, when we suffer a severe setback, whatever might be the setback, economic, relational, whatever, and it's so personal, here resilience has to come to the fore, to be able to take a wide-angle view of the situation, almost remove yourself from the immediacy of the situation and see how a third party might view it, as a mechanism to bring yourself back to who you really are. When we recover from illness, illness takes a toll. It almost always suggests a vulnerability. And when that vulnerability takes place, it's very hard to shake off. When someone, God forbid, has a bout of cancer and overcomes it, for some years often, there is a vulnerability. Every ache or pain becomes a fear moment that the cancer's recurred and what have you. And therefore resilience means to be able to step back and say to yourself, no, it's an ache or pain. You don't have to make the huge jump of cancer recurring. That's an inner resilience to be able to re-logicalize the particular situation. And all illnesses, serious illnesses, create vulnerabilities. So that's another aspect of resilience coming to the fore. Any others? Are we getting a better sense of what we mean by the word resilience? Because it's an abstract word. But we're saying it's more than simply thinking the right thing and feeling the right thing, although you have to be resilient in order to feel the right thing at the moment and to think the right thing. That's also got a quotient of resilience. But the ultimate sum total of your response means that you have a driving force to get back to yourself. You use mind, objectivity, use emotion in a balanced fashion, and therefore you can come back to who you really are.
Sorry, if you don't mind, what's the word for it in Hebrew? What's on it?
Anyone Hebrew speaking who knows the Hebrew word for resilience?
I forgot, I don't really know.
I'm not sure that there is an exact word.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sometimes they don't.
Because Hebrew words are much more specific. If we were to look at the word resilience, I'm sure in Lashon HaKodesh we'll find 3 or 4 words that make it up
Yeah, I know.
as a composite. In the same way as I said to you that resilience is ratzon coupled with moach and lev, all operating in terms of a balance, component parts to make up a situation as it is.
See, it's never...
Kosher, it's 2 words. Kosher, hit'osheshut, to recover.
Okay,
Empower,
so
yeah.
composite words, yeah. English is one of those languages where there's so many abstract terminologies. Got pluses and minuses. It means sometimes it's fewer words, but sometimes it means you know nothing. Okay. So if we were to identify the elements, we're just summarizing, that make up resilience, we're saying that it begins from a position of ratzon, drive. But drive has no direction. It has to be drive that drives the mind to be able to create a compass bearing which will tame the emotions, and then it's got to be all funneled through the nefesh elokit, other-centeredness, rather than through the nefesh bahamit, self-centeredness. So there's a few things there. So if we were doing a workshop session, what we would be doing is taking each of those elements and we would be actually expressing them and going through behavioral motions with each other in terms of training ourselves. But we know now that there are elements that make up the nature of resilience, and we can train in each of those elements and become more resilient. In other words, everything is trainable. Okay. So, some aspects of it. Deliberate choice to bounce back rather than stay in the dark. So here we come choice. Choice is the result of, you are now very well advanced in this subject matter because we keep repeating it. We always say that choice is the basic aspect that defines a human being. If we didn't have choice, we would be machines, robots. We have the choice to do wrong, we have the choice to do right. Okay? So you need to choose to bounce back. So you need the nefesh elokit. You need to have the higher self, other-centeredness. You have to have that as a first step into being able to get the direction of it right. Then the other things come into play. Drive, mind, emotion, etc. Not to slip into being reconciled to less than ideal circumstances. In other words, resilience would not include taking things lying down. So coming back to what you were saying before, not to take things lying down. It doesn't mean that you have to fight full pelt in the moment. You have to strategize how you're going to overcome the challenge. But you don't accept things. Remember the difference between acceptance and acknowledgement? For those of you who were in my last series, we don't have to accept, but we do need to acknowledge. What's the difference? Acknowledge means my eyes see it, my mind registers it. I'm not turning a blind eye to it. Acceptance is passive. All right, that's the way it is. And I can't do much about it. I'm not in favor of acceptance. I am big on acknowledgement though. Okay? So you have to acknowledge it. In other words, don't be reconciled and say, I can't do anything about it. The very fact that it's happening to you is because Hashem knows that you can do something about it, otherwise it wouldn't happen to you. That's the axiomatic. Nothing happens to you unless you have the capacity to overcome it. God is not unfair.
So it's a good question, what can I control?
Nothing.
Except myself. And my own
Correct.
thoughts, maybe.
You control nothing but yourself. Correct? But you can be a catalyst for change in everything around you. You can't control the outcomes, but you can be the catalyst to create change. Immediately or over time and over a lengthy period of time. You have that power. So don't slip into being reconciled to the situation. Many a counsellor might say you have to be reconciled. No, you don't have to be reconciled to the situation. You have to take a strategic approach for the future and not expect results tomorrow.
Can you give us an example of that?
Well, why don't you give me any case example in your life that you found?
I think you do have to accept.
Yes.
Things. I really do.
You want to give me an
that
example?
I'm against my RG. Do I have an example?
No.
Lots of examples, but I can't sort of...
Think of one at the
I don't
moment,
really want
okay?
to,
I think when we tend to say, Ruth, acceptance, I think we mean acknowledgement by and large. The idea of accepting situations which are painful or hurtful. Don't have to. Take even pain. Physical pain. Someone who suffers from an ailment that causes physical pain. So they're told, well, that's the price. Unfortunately, you'll have to accept that. But that's not true. We know full well that pain is subjective. We know that if a person expects pain, they'll feel the pain much more acutely than somebody else. The same quantum of pain. There's plenty of experiments that demonstrate that, and research results. That's my classic example of the wise parent telling the child, you're going to get your inoculation, you're going to get your vaccination, you're going to go to the doctor, don't be scared, there will be a big needle, but that needle's got only good things, and the good thing's going to enter into your bloodstream and make you a much healthier person, and your child is nodding sagaciously, and then you take the child to the doctor, and geschrei, the loudest yelling and screaming you ever heard. And why is that? And it's very simple. Because if you didn't tell the child anything beforehand, took the same child to the same doctor, producing the same needle, and then just averted the child's eyes momentarily, there still will be a yelp or two, but nothing as dramatic as the previous example. Why? When you're prepared for pain, you experience it more acutely. Same, therefore, with fear. Fear accentuates pain. If you're afraid, it'll hurt more. If you're in the dentist chair and not doing Laibl meditation exercises, you'll feel it more acutely. Whereas if you do relaxation response exercises, the pain will not be as great, maybe even none. So it's a variable.
But that's when you've got control over yourself.
That's the only thing you can have control over, yourself. But you can have control over yourself in every respect. Hard one, but like anything else, it requires training. It doesn't happen because I say, I'm now going to control myself. I'm now going to play the piano. I've never played before, now I'm going to play the piano. Ridiculous. You have to play the scales of training to become an individual who does have control over themselves.
Yeah, but for piano, I'm happy to play. They have a system. But
Correct.
What is the strategy and system?
It's in Chassidut. You have to sit down, study Sefer Tanya with a teacher, and provide you with a system. You're quite correct. It doesn't happen without a system.
So with this sort of issue, I mean, mind control or emotions,
Yes.
acknowledgement,
Yes.
is much harder, I think, because it's slippery. Sometimes you think, oh, I'm resilient, but then it's proved to be wrong. Because
I give in my CDs and tapes and USBs specific, very practical exercises on how to handle mind and how to handle emotion. You can be very, very specific. Just need the right exercises. You can't learn piano by learning athletics. You can't learn athletics by learning piano.
In the spur of the moment, what you're saying to do is very difficult.
Of course, if you're untrained. In the spur of the moment, if someone says, Ruth, get up and play the piano, it's going to be very, very difficult.
No, I'm not talking about piano.
But I'm saying that as an example. Anything in the spur of the moment is difficult if you're not prepared and trained for it. Everything. There's nothing in life that's not.
If a child doesn't want to do what you want to do, for example, I'm just using an example, and does the opposite, and you want the child to do what you want to do you accept their behaviour as the norm if they are going to continue to do what they want to do and not follow your description?
No.
Against you? No.
You acknowledge that this is their behaviour and you strategise how to change it over time.
Okay.
Okay? To rid oneself of siege mentality. That's an unusual one, siege mentality. People feel trapped. They feel trapped in a relationship. They feel trapped by economic circumstances. And they adopt a siege mentality. A siege mentality means to be frozen and not practice resilience. I'm frozen. I won't call on anything. It's a very common one also.
Fight, flight and freeze.
Okay, there's another F. Good. Flight, fight, and freeze.
Sorry, what did you say? To be frozen and not to take...
That's what siege mentality is. I'm saying that is to be frozen and not be able to respond in terms of any strategy whatsoever. It's like a fortress mentality. Everyone's the enemy and all I can do is protect myself, poor me, victim, and I can't do anything possibly to affect the outside. That will prevent resilience. And then we've got one which we've mentioned, how to be able to call on resilience, to be prepared to surrender one's ego to Hashem's larger plan, which is what I hinted at before. Nothing happens purposelessly. Everything has purpose. Everything has purpose.
What about the Holocaust?
Everything has purpose.
The Holocaust has a purpose.
Everything has purpose. We don't know the answers for most things that occur. Not just that one. Most things. No one knows the reason why they're suffering for anything whatsoever. Do you know why you step on an ant inadvertently and murder it?
Yes, to keep it or to kill it.
No, you don't. You don't want to do that. You don't want to kill insects.
No, you don't.
We have to be, it's one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, that we have to be kind to all animal kingdom. It's what makes us humane. Why did Hashem create a world where we would inadvertently step on an ant? Why would Hashem create a world where one person would murder another person? And if you multiply that by 6 million, it's only arithmetic. The problem is still the same problem, whether it's 1 or 6 million. So most things we do not understand. Nobody here can give me an answer to that. Nor the big one, nor the little one, because there's no little one.
That's
Okay.
not good enough excuse.
Sorry?
That's not good enough excuse.
You tell that to God.
No.
Right, just a second. Remember, your brain is 7 inches by 8 inches by 9 inches. Hashem's brain is infinite. What if your brain was 7 miles by 8 miles by 9 miles? It would be phenomenally brighter than it is now and still tiny in face of God's brain, so to speak. Humility, what we see as surrender, means to know there are things we won't know. And it's not good enough to say, well, it's not fair. We are the creation. That's the way we've been created. There's a reason for it? No idea what. Even if you send a letter to the editor, you probably won't get an immediate answer. But to be humble means to surrender to the moment. Not to accept the moment. Here, surrender means like acknowledge. I surrender, meaning I accept, not accept, I acknowledge that this is what is happening, and Hashem expects me to respond. And Hashem always gives me the potential to be able to respond. I may not see the result of that response in a year or 2 years. I may never see the result. Guess what? I may never in my lifetime even have the results of my response. So what? You have to see the response, otherwise it doesn't count. If you make the good response, that in itself is already the legitimization of how you behave, how you think, how you interpret. So it's not enough to say it's unfair, and it's not enough to say it's not a good enough excuse, God. Be humble and recognize, hey, we're so tiny. Nevertheless, we are told we have purpose and we have capacity. And Hashem, the master chess player, creates a chessboard of life whereby we can play the game successfully.
So would you say, Rabbi, that being stuck in a difficult situation is part of the challenges that we have to encounter, have to overcome, but are basically learn to overcome?
Correct. Stuck is not the right word. We should never be stuck, but we should always recognize that the situation is intended, but it also comes with the capacities to be able to work through it. Each one of us has the capacity to work through our own challenges. Otherwise, it would be an unfair God. We take axiomatically the God is fair, not unfair. Not to dig one's heels in, and therefore dig oneself into a hole. What does it mean to dig one's heels in?
Just be stubborn.
Stubbornness, yes. And what's happening in the mind when we're digging our heels in? What's happening in the mind?
I'm right.
It's me. Yeah, I'm right.
Negativity.
Yeah, it's not a positive, it's always a negative in some shape. I mean, there's a difference between assertiveness and digging one's heels in, right? Digging one's heels in is fortress mentality, or I need to be right, I'm not going to change, whatever. And assertiveness means I am going to insist on my point of view because it's for your benefit, whether you accept it or not. Of course, you have to strategize how you give it. If you yell at the person for their benefit, it's not going to work. So it's a very poor mechanism of conveying your strategy. So it's not just the choice of strategy, it's the methodology of presentation of the strategy. It's the patience in unrolling it, rolling it out, whatever might be the case. Because a lot of people say, I said the right thing. How did you say it? Did you say it nicely? Did you say it empathically? Did you say it in a way where you genuinely wanted and felt the other one's pain? Or did you say it? World of difference. Sure, you said the right thing, but you may as well not have said it. In fact, it's better if you hadn't said it, even if it was right, because all you did was set yourself back a step or two with the manner in which you said it. Resilience means to close that gap. Resilience means to be mindful in the moment that we have the capacity to overcome, want to overcome, ratzon, allow the mind to be wise, and thereby determine the correct flow of emotions in the moment. All those things part of resilience. Coping strategies. All right, let's see how do we actually begin a training program. So, a mindfulness ritual. Choose a small plot in your garden and prepare it for planting. Plant some herbs or flowers, and while doing so, say audibly to yourself, I am hopeful. I am hopeful, all the while you're planting. Then watch the progress daily while observing your garden patch for at least 60 seconds a day, saying audibly to yourself, I am hopeful. Now what are you being hopeful of? Yeah, that'll grow, it'll be, etc. You don't know that's the case. There's a lot of variables that are going to come into the picture to do with climate, to do with rain, to do with positioning in terms of the sun, and to do with perhaps other factors, quality of the soil, etc., etc. But you will be hopeful notwithstanding. And I'm telling you, and I cannot prove it, except I believe that it's been so shown, that if you exercise hopefulness, positivity towards a plant, it'll grow much better.
And talk to it.
And talk to it.
And talk to it.
And we know for sure that plants respond to music. There's been experiments that show that plants grow much better in the presence of classical music than rock music. That's not passing any judgment on the quality of music and your taste. It just happens to be the plants, as an audience, happen to prefer a certain kind of music. Okay?
It's all very well to say I'm hopeful, but you really need to look after that plant. You need to water it. You need to feed it.
Absolutely.
You can't just say I'm hopeful, because that just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if you say I'm hopeful, you'll have a much better result.
Not if you don't look after it.
But what
You
if
can't just go there and say I'm hopeful. That's
Ruth.
not enough.
you and me,
Yes.
I plant a garden, I don't say I'm hopeful, but I nurture it, and I prepare the
Yes.
soil, and I do everything you say.
Yes.
You, being a much wiser person, will not only prepare the soil and water it,
Yes.
etc., but also say, I'm hopeful, you will get a better result.
But
Okay?
you're hopeful anyway. You don't have to say it. Of course.
Well, I
you're
don't know.
You're planting it. Why are you planting it? You're planting it so that it'll grow.
If
Of
you
course
go,
you're hopeful.
yes, but you're going to plant it because of this exercise that I'm doing in this class, I'm saying, not because you happen to like a herb garden. I'm saying that if you go ahead and do it now, tomorrow, for this purpose, with this experiment in mind, you're going to get results. And the results that I'm talking about is not your garden, ultimately it's you.
Yeah.
Remember, this is you we're training. We're not training your plants. Okay? It's showing that your positivity, which ultimately is an ingredient of resilience, plays a very significant role in the world at large. That's one exercise.
Absolutely.
Ruth is not going to do that one,
No, no,
but let's try B.
Positive
Okay, the
is
next one.
definitely right. I agree.
Music. Choose a piece of music that you can associate with resilience and victory. How many of you are familiar with the music of Hans Zimmer? Yes. Everybody please Google Hans Zimmer. You can do. Someone can do it now if they wish. And we can so you can find the Gladiator, Hans Zimmer, and you can play it for us. He's a very, very foremost current musician of music scores for the film industry. Something really that is going to be highly motivational. We sing at the end of Yom Kippur, Napoleon's March. Those of you who come to Spiritgrow Yom Kippur service will find in the last Kaddish, we get up and dance and sing Napoleon's March.
No internet.
Ridiculous. Oh, there is an internet, but you have to get the right code for it. Okay, when you find it, just play it nice and loud. Victory. Hopefulness. We've overcome Yom Kippur, and we've lived through the Yom Kippur. We are absolved. We are very positive and hopeful. We therefore express it with Napoleon's March. Not that we like Napoleon. Historically, Napoleon, as far as the Chabad Hasidic tradition is concerned, was probably the worst thing that happened to Jewish peoplehood. When Napoleon advanced on Russia, historically, the Alter Rebbe took the side of the Tsar against Napoleon. Not that the Tsar was a friend of the Jews at all, quite the contrary. Why? Because the kind of freedoms that Napoleon offered was going to be destructive to Jewish people not ready to entertain them. Have you got it over there? I don't think so.
Because it just says it's the general soundtrack, so it's probably going through all of them.
Oh yeah, you may be quite correct. Okay, sorry. All right, so music. Find a piece of music that you find inspirational. I don't know if any of you have that, but if you have that, do so. Listen to it 3 times a day, morning, lunch and evening, especially before a difficult altercation. Listen to that music before you have a difficult situation that you know you can anticipate beforehand. You find that that changes your whole internal mechanics, because music is a much more powerful entry point to the soul than are words.
Chariots of fire.
Chariots of Fire is another good one. Yeah, very good. Identify emotional bruises. Bruises show up in the form of negative self-talk, despair, sense of hopelessness, low self-esteem. If you can acknowledge these, not accept them, however, you can maybe undo them one by one. Be humble. Be prepared to share your challenge with friends. Sharing provides opportunities for good advice to get it out of your system and to draw from other strengths. A lot of people are very self-conscious about sharing problems with others. And I understand that. And you know why? Why must we be reluctant, reticent to share problems with others? What might be some of the blockages or stopping? Shame.
Judgmental. People are
Feeling that we may be judged.
Because people don't want to hear bad things.
Or you feel that the other person doesn't want to hear your problems, so don't go to that person.
Or that other person's going to share it with someone.
Or that other person's not trustworthy enough and is going to pay whatever.
Unsolicited advice.
Correct. So you have to have your best friend, obviously, someone that you trust that will overcome a lot of these issues. But by being able to share it, as we're told, it means there are 2 nefesh elokis against 1 nefesh bahamis. What does that mean? You want an answer but you're in a quandary. You have inner conflict because your lower order self is fighting with your higher order self. By going to a friend, a good friend, they only want the best for you. They have no quandary. They're not in any conflict about your situation, or you are. So it's their positivity plus your positivity, two positivities against your negativity, against one. Therefore, it's bound to work. Always go to a friend.
From my experience, I found that going to friends is not necessarily the solution.
I suppose it depends on your friends.
They have their own issues. No one is free of issues, of some dilemmas. So they have...
Not your role to discuss other people's issues. Not your role to judge other people's circumstances. It may be empathic, what you're saying.
No, but they have to share it. No, well, from my experience, no one is free. So they can't just be like a slate, an empty slate. They listen and then they add their interpretation.
We want that. We want their interpretation. We want their nefesh elokit. We want them to offer, enlarge our perception of the problem. We want that. We don't want them just to be a good listener, although that's good. We really value their opinion. That's why they are our best friend, or counselor, or rabbi, or whatever might be the individual.
Because they're not emotionally.
Because they're not part of the problem. Sure, they may have their peckle, but that's, at that moment, you can't compartmentalize yourself and say, oh, no, I'm going to direct myself to you. When I have somebody sitting in front of me and I'm talking to them, I'm not thinking about my problems. I hope I'm not, but I'm not.
Laibl, if someone keeps the problem within themselves, they become very introverted and it pulls them right down.
Exactly.
And if they can share it, at least it's the problem's divided by two.
I share that.
And also the other person might feel very happy to be able to help.
Mm.
They may feel that your friendship, your trust in them is now
Yes.
affirmed.
That's right.
Yeah.
But would you agree that men share less than the women?
Sure.
Yeah, by nature, because men tend to be more self-centered, men tend to be more in terms of proud, therefore humility in men is much
Ego,
less,
yes.
sharing in men is much less. Yeah, and that's a fault, it's not a plus.
No.
There are a lot of men's circles that are starting now for men to express themselves.
Excellent.
You've got
Yeah,
to
but they
learn
gotta go.
it.
Yeah, but there is the ability
And that's
to...
why they need women, I guess.
And that's why God made Eve. Okay? So what we've done in these 3 sessions is analysed what I call 3 tools that we can utilise usefully in context of family or any other situations that are problematic, creating conflict and the like. Now, as I was saying all along, these tools need to be nurtured. They're not going to be there just because you happen to remember them. You have to have them practiced, you have to have them reinforced, you have to create the mindfulness, and that's why I'm giving always in the second half of these sessions these exercises for you to do. And I hope I provide sufficient number that something suits somebody. Now, we know that Ruth's not going to plant gardens, but we do know she's going to listen to music. So that's wonderful. Okay. In other words, a bit for everybody in each one of these sessions. So that is the completion of this set of 3. Any questions? 1, 2.
Do you believe though that sometimes, I mean often we say this about kids, but it can be with anyone, that we need to pick our battles, as they say, so in terms of, so obviously you're trying to practice resilience, but there might be times where you say, okay, no, this is a time where I need to breathe deeply and either say something or...
That is resilience.
Yeah.
If your judgment call in the moment is, this is not the right moment, rather I am going to get myself to myself, that is being resilient. It's the opposite of a letting yourself go and just responding with the immediacy without any thought and allowing your emotions to get the better of yourself. That is not resilience. What you're describing is resilience. Yes.
Can I just ask?
Last question.
You were talking about your purpose, and we're talking about the Holocaust, and that when people experience such a terrible thing, does it affect the way they think of their purpose in life according
Absolutely. Everything that affects us has an effect that remains, residual. Everything leaves an imprint, and it can enlarge us or it can stultify us. It depends how we choose to allow the adversities of life to affect us. Some people came out of the horrific circumstances of the Holocaust and were never able to regain their lives and went mad, and totally understandable. Other people went through and lived life as if it were normal, although they were never completely normal because of the memories, what have you. So there's a whole range of responses that we have to circumstances of adversity. And that's who we are as human beings. But we can train to become better in our response mechanisms and reach a much higher degree of norm if we are masterful than if we aren't.
And how does, say, mental illness comes into it?
Well, mental illness comes into it in the same way that any even physical shortcoming. What if someone has an amputee, lost an arm, lost a leg? How does that come into it? Their lives are profoundly altered. Nevertheless, coming to terms, acknowledging it, not accepting the shortcoming, but rising even beyond what they were before, which is often the case. We have interesting statistic in psychology. People who have had an amputation of a limb of the body are happier individuals than people that don't, statistically. You can look that up. Why? Because of this point. When you suffer a loss, you have the potential to rise to become bigger than you were before. You can fall, but you can rise, and usually people who have a physical deficiency are more capable of doing so. We're not talking here in terms of necessarily mental. So what we're saying is there are qualities of life. In mental deficiency, it's another aspect of amputation. The mind, metaphorically, is amputated. We can't judge the quality of those people's lives. We can't judge the purpose of those people's lives. It becomes their particular measuring stick, not ours. And therefore, we just, as assistants, provide the best we can to allow the quality of their lives to be expressed through themselves as best as possible. And we can't judge, and we can't in any way affect the facts of the circumstances.
What if it is an interaction, daily interaction?
Then between someone and yourself like that, then under those circumstances, God has placed that person in your care because God judges you to be the best assistant for that person's quality of life. So you have a privilege in so doing. I'm going to pause at this moment and say goodbye. Enough. Because I'm going to South Africa on Tuesday and for lectures there, and I'll be gone for a couple of weeks.
That's tomorrow, isn't it?
That's tomorrow, yes. Be well.
Thank you.
See you soon. Thank you.
Safe travels.
Thank you.